Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Viaka Health Tech Roundtable. I'm Malak Abdul Wahab, and I lead the communications function here at Viaka. We are really happy to welcome you all, and it's going to be a really good, exciting discussion. So before we dive into the discussion, I want to take a moment to introduce Viaka and our generous sponsors. Viaka is an angel network and global platform that connects high-performing founders, investors, and professionals with ties to or interest in the MENA region. Our work is centered on three main pillars: Viaka Connect, Consult, and Capital. Viaka Connect represents our community. We have nearly 3,000 people in our orbit, and today we are in 7 global hubs. And actually, later this year in November, we'll be launching our flagship MENA Rising conference in Toronto. So stay tuned for that. Our second pillar is Viaka Consult, our consulting arm. Viaka Consult allows us to leverage the exceptional global MENA talent to work on ecosystem building initiatives in the region and support exceptional founders. And our third arm is our investment arm, Viaka Capital, which connects exceptional founders and investors in our network. And actually central to this is our demo days that we host a few times a year, and our growing angel syndicate. Which made its first investment in April, and there are 2 more investments that we will be announcing soon that we closed. Now I'm going to move to thanking our amazing, incredible sponsors who supported this event. Our first sponsor is Flatiron Data and AI. They are a specialized team of seasoned tech leaders, data engineers, and AI experts driving innovation for tech companies. A really huge thank you to Viaka member Sami Abrudi, founder and principal at Flatiron, for his support. His team has played a key role in building multiple unicorns, including in complex sectors like health tech, by combining deep technical expertise with strategic insight and scalable infrastructure. And their clients have seen amazing results, like 30% growth in D2C, 25% B2B retention uplift, and 80% clinical quality improvements. Our second sponsor for this event is Taft. Taft is a leading law firm with deep expertise supporting startups, venture funds, and high-growth tech companies. And here we are especially grateful to Abe Wahbi, a longtime Viaka member and venture capital attorney at Taft, whose focus on fundraising and VC funds adds tremendous value to our community. So thank you so much, Abe. So today's discussion couldn't be more timely. Our panel brings together deep expertise from founders, investors, and ecosystem builders who operate at the forefront of innovation in MENA and beyond. And today together, we'll explore the barriers and opportunities in scaling health tech, the realities of operating in fragmented markets, what investors are really looking for, and how we can move from incremental improvements to true systemic change. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Reem to get the discussion started. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much for this wonderful intro, Malak. Moving on to our panelists, we have an incredible lineup today who will bring different experiences and insights to the health tech sector in the MENA region and beyond. I'd love to hand it over to our panelists to quickly introduce themselves. Let's start with Lana, Ayah, Ayman, and then Saif. So Lana, please.
All right. Thanks, Reem, Malak and Hani, for hosting us. It's a pleasure to be here and to be part of this panel. So I'm Lana Ghanem. I'm the managing director of Hikma Ventures, which is the corporate VC arm of Hikma Pharmaceuticals. In my previous life, I was an investment banker. I did 3 years of M&A in London. And just back to Hikma Ventures, we established it in 2015 to essentially act as the strategic VC arm for Hikma. We've been investing in strategic areas that can supplement Hikma's offering and differentiate it as a global generic manufacturer. And we aim to basically plant seeds in areas that are disrupting healthcare. The fund is an evergreen fund. We've invested in 20 companies to date. We have a global mandate. 2 of our investments are in the Middle East and North Africa. Actually, one of them is Altibbi, and 18 are in North America. And we've been mainly investing in digital health or health tech, but very recently we decided to expand our scope to include biotech and diagnostics. I'll talk more about this later. Our sweet spots are usually the Series A and B. We've done earlier, we've done later stage deals, and we're very much aligned with Hikma's areas of focus. So we've been investing in areas where Hikma has a portfolio, including chronic diseases, respiratory, oncology, and neurodegenerative diseases and autoimmune diseases.
Thank you, Lana. Ayah.
Yeah, hi everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thank you as well to the Viaka team for hosting us and having us. So, Ayah Hamdan, I serve as the head of health at Plug and Play Ventures. For those that don't know Plug and Play, we've been around since 2006. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley. That's where I'm sitting. But we have 62 offices around the world. We're a family office, a VC fund. We run an accelerator in each of those 62 offices that we have globally, and we do corporate innovation. So we partner with large corporations, support them with connections to startups that might solve their pain points, their challenges. And because I'm focused on health, many of my partners are big pharma, large health systems, med device manufacturers, etc. But we are also in 25 other industries aside from health. That just happens to be my focus. And in terms of my background, I've been at Plug and Play for 3 years, but prior to Plug and Play, I've studied and worked exclusively in public health and healthcare. I've been at a startup that went from Series B to C growth stage. And I call it an ex-academic and an ex-pre-med. So I've studied epidemiology and public health in terms of my academic training, and had my own little startup for a bit as well. And that's a little bit about me, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you, Ayah. Ayman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Reem and Viaka, for this opportunity. My name is Ayman Sharaiha. I'm one of the co-founders of Altibbi. Altibbi is the largest digital health platform in the MENA region. We started off as a content portal, and we grew to be the largest healthcare Arabic content platform in the world. We have around 2 million pages of healthcare content that drive around 1 million unique visitors on a daily basis. Later on, we pivoted into where the patient is headed. We started our virtual primary care platform in 2017. We grew from 50 consultations per day to today we're doing somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 consultations per day. So from content towards telehealth, and now we're actually headed into the artificial intelligence world, where we're trying to be AI enabled and AI first throughout the patient journey. And that's where we're headed. My background is not medical. I'm an engineer, an MBA by education. I had my own stint in the US where I started my own telehealth company. It was a global telehealth platform. And then afterwards, I worked in an internet investing company. So I got involved in investments, fundraising, and then operations, product management, business intelligence. So well versed on the whole spectrum of startups. And afterwards, I joined Altibbi.
Thank you, Ayman. And Saif, last but not least.
Shukran. Saif Aljaibeji. I'm a physician turned corporate CEO turned entrepreneur. I think the easier way to introduce myself is I sit in the middle of corporate and entrepreneurship, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Wonderful. Yes. So let's start talking about the two over the past 2 years. There have been, as we would all agree, two really defining or pivotal moments in the health tech sector as a whole. COVID, of course, which increased the uptake of basically digital adoption, and it shifted investor focus and also patient behavior, and maybe it set the stage for the second defining moment, which is the uptake or the use of AI. I think we're all very familiar with what happened with COVID, and we've since moved on. I'd love to hear from all of you what is happening today with AI. How is this, how you as investors are seeing those changes, the use of AI, and then Ayman also and Saif maybe as founders to talk about how you're leveraging AI. I'd love to start with Ayman because Ayman, when we chatted, you mentioned Altibbi 1.0, and then with AI, Altibbi 1.2. So please, 2.0. So let's talk a little bit about your experience and where are you heading with AI today?
So just to quickly just allude to the COVID part of what you were asking. To us, COVID was basically an awareness booster. So digital health had an adoption problem, and COVID basically forced everyone to start using telehealth. It increased the awareness on the insurance side as well, where we started seeing sales cycles actually being shorter when companies like us who go pitch for insurance companies to improve the quality of care while reducing the cost of care. That took time because of the lack of data, but I think COVID helped expedite these things.
Mm,
Uh, Post-COVID, there was a lot of talk about basically things reverting back to normal. So if there were a lot of studies actually that came out, even ones done by Harvard, where it talks about the adoption, the virtual adoption pre and post-COVID, and how most specialties actually went back to pre-COVID levels in terms of virtual care penetration, apart from mental health, which sort of stuck at the higher adoption curve. I think the reason for that is that the structure of the healthcare system did not change post-COVID. It took time. You still had a lot of stakeholders. These stakeholders did not solve the data silo issue and
mm,
basically the connections between them, the seamless patient journey that has to go through, the doctor, the lab, the pharmacy, the insurance company. These things take time to actually resolve. And these companies are large, and okay, fine, there was an awareness thing that happened, but the actual implementation of everything else with the regulation is still taking its time.
mm,
Uh, I think that leads to where AI is going to come into the second innovation cycle of digital health. I think AI is going to help expedite this, help expedite the interoperability, which is a huge problem between the stakeholders in the healthcare system, and it's going to just break down all the barriers. So we're looking forward to when we say we want to have an end-to-end journey. I think AI is going to help in doing that.
Okay, and how are you setting yourself up to use AI? And has it been an easy journey for you, Ayman?
So we had the foresight and the luck, to be honest, to start investing in AI well before this basically the large language model frenzy happened. So we've assembled an AI team in 2020 because we had large data sets of consultations. And so we wanted to structure our data, and we created our own mini large language model in 2022, which was based on Altibbi data, Altibbi content, Altibbi consultations, and we started using it on the physician side of things. So we started supporting the doctor in his diagnosis, supporting the doctor in while during the consultation, we would prompt questions for the doctor to ask based on the discussion that is going on with the patient. And then after the consultation, we'd summarize it and suggest a structured SOAP note, which is subjective objective assessment plan. That was before, the whole ChatGPT frenzy. Now, after that, I think it simplified a lot of things. And we basically are releasing or released Altibbi 2.0, which is Sina, a conversational AI agent that basically talks everything healthcare. So it starts with basically summarizing the content in a conversational manner, but then it's going to move towards extracting your data, connecting you with physicians, submitting the reimbursement claim, connecting you with a pharmacy or the lab, and basically just having that seamless end-to-end journey in one interface. That's where we are headed, at least.
Amazing. We will talk about the operational challenges and then engaging with other key stakeholders in the ecosystem, after we talk more about AI. So we will come to that topic definitely. Saif, I'd love to your take on this. You're a retired, exited founder. You're in between the corporate world and the startup world today. What are you seeing in terms of what's happening with AI today?
Well, for about a year, I've pushed back. I thought AI is just, especially in the Bay Area where you are, AI is like, I felt that there was a push as I was building a personalized concierge medicine and wellness program, and everyone talks about AI. So it took me a year. I come very late into the game. Now I'm AI everything. I think once we have built a model without using the open sources or the generic data, if you understand exactly what you're doing, there are a lot of benefits of leveraging some of the AI, whether direct to consumer or back end models. I see corporates are failing, and I'll answer more from corporate. There was a buzz, especially on the insurance side, on the healthcare side, to use AI to help with the customer journey. I think in the statistics, they were like 40–50% of corporate CEOs thinking about AI, but a lot of them eventually decided that they don't want to work with the startups. They want to take a step back and decide what really works for them. However, being in healthcare, I see AI is doing a great job when it comes to back office. So what Ayman is doing, and congratulations, Ayman, this is front office, it's customer. But if you think about AI in radiology, I don't think there's any hospital today that haven't implemented some use cases on the back end, whether it's diagnostic. I think what Lana would tell us maybe more about drug discovery. I mean, those were amazing success. But in the front office, we would have to customize AI a lot to our region, to the patient preference, to the family preference, to the language of preference. But I see a wave of implementation. One of the model is like simplifying the interaction between the physician and the patient using something like a chat GPT that explains what's going on. A lot of what we've done over a year of Excel sheets, no technology at all, have now translated into how AI models like ChatGPT or Sina can help boost or accelerate what we do as a humans. But I'm fascinated by what AI could do in the front office in healthcare, but I haven't seen any model that I would say, oh, they nailed it. I know in the back office there are successful companies, they've raised funding, but in the front office, I think there is a lot of trials and errors, and I see where I sit today, there is more resistance from the corporate side to work with highly, or successfully funded startups that talks AI. I think a lot they want to do something more like, I'd say, their own model. And there is a lot of concern about data, like when startup knocks the door and wants to work with my colleagues in the insurance sector, and Ayman tells them that we have this great model. They have those concerns, like, but this is my own data. What will happen to my data? I think there is a lot to be done in translating how can we work together.
Very interesting. we will get to talk about all of this. Ayah, tell us a bit. You invest in the region. Tell us a bit about your work in the region, what you've been seeing. You also invest in companies in the US as well. So, what's going on with AI today?
Yeah, well, my friends here took some of my talking points, but no, I mean, I'll never forget the graph that we saw in terms of like US funding into digital health startups, right? In 2021, it was $30 billion invested. And like Ayman said, there's pros and cons to this. The pros are that health and healthcare became a priority and of interest to many people that might not have been paying attention to it previously. The cons to it are that you see like generalist investors that don't understand the industry, don't understand the clinical applications of technologies like AI that are still investing heavily. So valuations were spiking unreasonably, you could say, or in an unjustified way. And then on top of that, it became this like cool thing to invest, or sorry, to even build a healthcare startup. So you saw these engineers that were fantastic engineers, but started building healthcare companies without clinical expertise. And so now we've seen like the stabilization of that now that it's been several years since 2021 and the pandemic and whatnot. But definitely, I would say what I call back office automation, everything including prior authorization, medical billing, all of these non-clinical tasks, great applications of AI. That's probably the most common types of companies that I'm seeing, that I'm meeting with. And they're essentially trying to address the most difficult problem in healthcare. And so you could say it's a crowded space, but one that still deserves investments, and change needs to happen. And so looking forward to what AI can do in terms of transforming the back office. And in terms of how we invest in the US and we invest in the region, the Middle East, et cetera. So we actually have physical teams in the Middle East. We have a Riyadh office, an Abu Dhabi, Dubai office, a Cairo office, and one in Morocco. And that helps. That helps in terms of showing, dedication to the region. Our CEO and founder had spent several years in Saudi in his early career, and he's an international businessman. So that's part of our DNA at Plug and Play, is to be this, although we're headquartered in Silicon Valley, but it's to be this really globally, internationally engaged company. And so I love working with our Middle East teams. I could give an example of, a startup called Deep Echo. They do maternal health diagnostics, and they're a Moroccan company that we invested in probably back in 2020, 2021. And now that they've been working in Morocco and building their company for several years, they recently got FDA clearance to scale to the US. So I'm having conversations with them about supporting their scale to the US. Things like bringing them to the major healthcare conferences that happen here in the US, connect them to our partners. But in order for me to do that, they have to put their head down and work really hard on their studies and their clinical validation and get the FDA clearance. So it was, of course, a testament to their hard work and their focus. And then that makes it easier for me to do my job, like help them with the ecosystem connections here. So that's just one example, but hopefully that touches on some of the points, Reem.
Thank you, Ayah. Lana, what are you seeing in terms of how AI is disrupting the uptake of AI?
Sure. I mean, if we take, if we go back to kind of the COVID era, I think, everyone, especially Ayman, kind of gave a good overview. But I mean, in general, before COVID, we saw that there was a lot of skepticism around the digital health category as a whole, due to the lack of exits, as well as obviously slow adoption. But post-COVID, we saw a lot of IPOs. It was like the frothy, period. A lot of M&A activity, which propelled the industry forward, like at a global scale. We saw a rise in valuations, as Ayah mentioned, and investment in the sector between 2020 and 2023. And to Ayman's point, there was a rise in mental health platforms because the pandemic was extremely stressful on many people. It deprived them of, many of their coping mechanisms. So they basically kind of were open to seeing therapists online and that kind of stuff. I think one aspect, and maybe it's thanks to COVID that I saw a lot of traction in. I think we're still seeing growing traction in is basically people started to invite more smart devices into their lives and into their homes. And I feel like that could be attributed to COVID as well. So many people became willing to share their health related data. They placed a lot of value on convenience, less face-to-face interaction, which kind of grew a lot of momentum with some digital health startups. And I saw that in general, like people have become more proactive in wanting to manage their own health, interested in tracking certain biomarkers like sleep, heart rate variability, glucose in real time. So we saw a rise in sectors like telemedicine and remote monitoring, which gained a lot of traction. Now, at the same time, we saw a lot of digital therapeutics like go public, and digital health companies go public through SPACs, right? Like special purpose vehicles at very inflated prices, $1 billion plus, and a lot of these companies actually didn't have much clinical validation or backing. So you'd have they'd raise hundreds of millions of dollars. And that, post COVID and, post kind of, that COVID bubble, they like at the end of the day, when they ran out of money, and obviously it was like the growth at all cost mentality. They realized that if investors realized that they can no longer back these companies at this inflated valuation, so a lot of them actually went bankrupt, and that like did a disservice to the whole industry. And I think companies are still suffering because of that. Now, if you see kind of if you look at the 2023, until today and year to date era, the high interest rate environment, difficult, exit environment, closed IPO market didn't help. We noticed like there was a decline in investment due to a lot of economic and geopolitical instability globally with the Trump administration coming in. The healthcare industry is kind of watching to see how that's going to affect FDA approval, staffing, grant funding, which a lot of healthcare startups in the US are dependent on. So we're still kind of I think initially this year, like when I talked to investors, they were cautiously optimistic, but now like everyone is just watching from the sidelines to see how things are going to pan out. At least for us, we've been mainly managing our portfolio companies. We haven't deployed any new capital, not because we don't have it. It's because we've become much more selective in investing in companies. We're now seeing more kind of mega rounds, later stage deals, focus on a small number of companies. I mean, there is money. There's still, dry powder there, whether it's corporate VCs or independent VCs. But I guess, they're all going towards like, fewer deals, I would say. And we're also noticing now like there are obviously more company shutdowns and more consolidation happening at the startup level. Now, on the AI question, whether it's disruptive or not when it comes to care, I think AI is definitely augmenting care. I think maybe it's being disruptive in certain pockets, like Saif mentioned in radiology. I think that's the best use case. I mean, we actually invested in a company called Octave Bioscience in the US, and they kind of track the progression of multiple sclerosis in patients. And they use AI in their MRI model. So, we're seeing a lot of that. We're receiving decks to many, companies in the oncology space that, where AI, the use of AI can actually expedite the diagnosis of, disease and, produce basically more accurate results. Again, AI is being used by pharma companies to, help them expedite R&D. With Hikma, we're a generic company, so we're still trying to find an AI, drug, AI drug, I guess, targeted platform that can help us with our generic process versus, new kind of chemical entities. And I think there are companies, here and there. We just need to work with the right one. And obviously, as also other panelists mentioned, we see it kind of being used in clinics, in hospitals, to in the use of medical scribes, etc., to make sure that the paperwork is reduced, documentation is reduced, everything is being automated, so that clinicians can spend more time with the patient. And I personally think that AI is an enabler that will support the kind of human clinician touch, if you will, versus kind of completely replace it. Because I do think if there is one thing we learned from COVID is that like at least in this era, like people really still value empathy and that kind of human to human touch. So when it comes to care, I think you can't just completely replace it unless it's kind of analytics, the CNAs of the world, radiology. You still need a clinician to do like the quality checks or to kind of deal with patients.
Yeah, that's great to hear, actually. I heard back end and front end from a number of you. So what a founder who's working on the back end, how is that founder different from a founder who's working on the front end? Is there like a distinct differentiation? Are they more medical people on the back end? Just very quickly, if somebody can respond to that.
I can give you my short answer. I would say B2B, B2C.
Okay.
If you want to focus on back end, you'll have to learn the game of it's a SaaS. You're working with large corporation. You are not exposed. You don't make it to front and headlines, and the journey is long. But a couple of contracts will get you sorted. If you want to focus on front end, a lot is about hype. You have to understand sales, marketing, branding. Just like what Ayman is running. It's Altibbi, it's known, you can build on it. But if I want to run a new brand, direct to consumer, and the front end, I have to build trust. That's I think in summary. It doesn't matter. You could be technically sound on the front end or on the back end. I don't think it matters. It's more like the commercial model. How do you talk to investors? And then do you want to acquire customers or you want to go through like the proof of concepts? Back to Ayman was saying like pitching to insurer, those are lengthier conversations, and even in my opinion, when it comes to the founder's persona, back end is not meant for everyone.
Okay, very interesting. All right, let's shift gears a little bit and roll up our sleeves and talk a bit more about operations. How, what are the opportunities and challenges in the MENA region? Specifically, I'd love to hear from Ayman and Saif specifically here because they, Ayman, you started Altibbi in Jordan, so the Levant market is different in terms of infrastructure, the stakeholders, and then you scaled into other markets in the MENA region. We'll talk about scaling later, but let's focus on operations today. You were started in the Levant and then went into the GCC markets and North Africa as well. Saif, you also built a company in the GCC. I'd love to hear from both of you your experience. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges, the barriers to operating specifically in the Levant and the GCC markets? Ayman, let's start with you.
Sure. I guess there's a way to segment so GCC and non-GCC. I think it's quite obvious now that the GCC has become more mature in terms of an ecosystem and in terms of regulatory clarity. So, when we started, there were no regulations in the Middle East as a whole, and we were operating on the premise of better ask for forgiveness than permission. So we were doing it anyway and trying to, be bound by our own ethical guidelines and sort of global standards. I think in the GCC, yes, there is regulatory clarity which helps, but there are still challenges when it comes to basically the doctor distribution. We work, for example, I'll give you a specific example on a distributed model. Instead of having full-time doctors in a call center, we have doctors in a distributed model where we sort of monitor and guide them and provide our own standards of how they should be operating. But if doctors are not allowed to work part-time with you unless they have like an OC with, they usually work for a hospital or a company, which our distributed model allows the doctor to charge less because, for example, if he has an office at home, he can do consultations at home, and his willingness to charge would be less, which means we are bringing down the cost of care. A full-time doctor would be 5x the cost for me when I compare him to a doctor who is working part-time on a distributed model. So we are actually bringing down the cost of care, but it's not possible because of these sponsorship mechanisms that we're seeing in the GCC. Obviously, there's a higher insurance penetration, so it's easier for us to talk to insurance companies in the UAE specifically. They understand telehealth, they understand the value of it, and so the sales cycle could be something around 3 to 6 months. And in less mature GCC countries, sales cycles could take between 1 and 2 years to just get one insurance company. And then that's also part of the struggle. I think insurance is a big barrier to telehealth adoption or digital health adoption. In places like the Levant, we say Jordan, Egypt, insurance penetration is low anyway. Purchasing power is low. You don't have a thriving middle class that can actually afford to have an online credit card, the right basically awareness to use basically digital health tools. So payment infrastructure is a big issue. The lack of regulatory clarity is a big issue. So we offline is still important. An offline handshake between me as a digital health provider and the patient, either through a third-party distributed model or just directly, makes all the difference. The challenge for me is, when we talk about telehealth and virtual primary care, we try to bring down the cost of care. And so the transactional cost or the fee for service, our subscription prices are not high, right? We're not talking about a $50 to $100 basket consultation. It's much less. And when it's much less, it becomes challenging for me to, for example, do a cash on delivery, for example, right? So I have to go through third-party mediators who have distribution centers around the country, for example, like microfinance institutions who could bundle the telehealth service with the actual loan. So you have to, think creatively of how you do distribution, which is one of the biggest challenge. Going direct to consumer has been great for us because we had a great content strategy. And that great content strategy allowed us to acquire the users at a very, very low cost, which is not possible. You don't see direct-to-consumer telehealth companies around the world. But we made it work because we were also content first. Yeah, so these are the major challenges that we're facing. Payment infrastructure, regulatory clarity, and actually executing on a distributed model for doctors, and the lack of data that supports us claiming that telehealth will reduce the cost of care, results in longer sales cycles. So
Are the differences between the two markets, the Levant and the GCC, vast, Ayman, in terms of online payments, the regulatory environment? It's a large gap.
Yeah, so we've been working with the Ministry of Health in Jordan for the past year and a half to work on the telehealth تعليمات or instructions, and the telehealth law that hasn't come out yet, and so we have two insurance companies that we've signed with in Jordan that are waiting for that to happen for us to be able to work with one another. There are other entities would be bolder in taking the risk and working with you, but insurance, which is a major stakeholder, that's not happening yet. So in terms of Payment infrastructure, yes, it's still an issue. I think, in the next hopefully couple of years, it shouldn't be an issue. We have, things like Click or e-Fawatirkum or these government instigated or initiated payment solutions and fintech infrastructure that are hopefully helping. But for example, Click is a peer-to-peer payment solution, but it's not yet business to consumer.
Yeah.
So that takes time. Yeah, in the UAE and Saudi, credit card penetration is not an issue, and regulation is much more mature.
Yeah. Saif, let's tell us a bit about your experience. I mean, it was you had an easier time, I would assume. Very quickly, you ramped up to 500,000 users. You built an insurance technology company. So tell us a bit about your experience in the UAE.
Absolutely. I'll tell some of the audience who doesn't know Sahtec. So Sahtec is Saha and technology. We've started in 2017, 2018. Health insurance is mandatory in the UAE. So all what the magic was, we bring consumer tech into the health insurance distribution model. And I think we were lucky because 100% of our operation were automated based on technology. We were based in a warehouse, so not your typical insurance. When COVID hit and remote work was mandatory, we had a differentiator. And it's actually, we've extended our technology to many of my competitors so they can use it. So back to your initial question, I think for me, COVID was an accelerator. Now let's go back to the challenges. I suffer more than Ayman because I operated in a heavily regulated area. It's health
Interesting.
and financial, it's insurance. I have central bank, and then I have ministries of health or Department of Health. And I want to share in full honesty, compared to my latest venture here in the US. So when we talk about scale, we were going by 5x, which is amazing when I talk to Ayah or maybe I talk to Lana, because 5x year on year is great. And ideally, like raising some money so we go to a new market is no brainer. But what happened is to go from Dubai market, where we eventually reached to 1 million consumers. So it makes sense that I go to Abu Dhabi market. And in Abu Dhabi, I need a complete new set of regulation and licenses. That takes time, it's expensive. So I think if we go back to the point of scale in the region, although we all speak Arabic, there is so many, I would say, easy, low-hanging fruits that by expanding to the next country, but the regulatory framework has very limited clarity. Like I might know what's going on today in Saudi, but it's very difficult to build a 5 year plan based on what will go over there. And it's usually it's getting better, but getting better sometimes is scary. It's still change. And I think the gap when it comes to regulatory framework, or how do you talk to a regulator in the wider Levant compared to the GCC, we will need a 2 hour session just to talk about it. And if there's anyone in the audience, I used to be a regulator, so when I talk about regulators, usually they take it with an open chest. But in the GCC, whether it's Saudi, Bahrain, you can email, WhatsApp, talk to a regulator. Maybe they'll tell you what's going on. Some would have a sandbox, which is great for us. Like you can implement within a sandbox, and I don't have to go to investors and ask them about licensing money. And God bless Ayman, like when you talk telemedicine, the tech itself is expensive, but then to be licensed in every city and market, this is a lot of money. Now, the US is similar. It's also complex when it's come to regulation, but you have easier scale because to get a license from a state to a state, still you need a license, but it's not the way I'm explaining. Like I was scared when we wanted to scale from a state to state in my latest venture, but it's not as it's almost the same. It's like a routine. They want to make sure that if there is anything super special about the licensing in the new state, then you adopt to it.
Yeah.
I'm not you Ayman, you did a great job. You talked about financial inclusion and the payment and the infrastructure, and I think the gap is big. But I want to share with you another gap we had, which is talents. I know we have so many, great universities and people looking for jobs. And I come on this on this panel and I say we have a gap in talents, and I know some people would hate me for it, but it's true. You don't have talents. There are some missing talents that doesn't help you when you want to scale. You still have to find some expertise, especially now when we talk AI. You go to the Valley area where Ayah is, and in a coffee shop you'll find AI engineers who have actually developed. But when you look at our region, there are many people who says that they claim that they are, AI engineers and they know it, but you're not sure. And that applies even more when you go technical, like if you're addressing a fintech or a financial product or a health insurance product.
Subject matter expertise. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or you'll have to go, hire expertise and pay them an extra premium because you're taking them from the industry. And it's a challenge when I ran a startup, and I brought an equivalent amount of experts from the startup ecosystem who knows consumer tech, and that was maybe easier for me. But to attract talents from the industry to come to a startup, the conversation is not only about money. You need to sell them the dream. You need to sell them the stability because they have years and years of experience and track record in an industry, and you're telling them to join a startup. So it's expensive, it's not sustainable. And I think it's one of the major issues when you compare it to the US, where you have universities preparing their students to be AI engineers or work with the startups versus in the region where the majority wants to find a stable government job.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's the issue now is compounded and amplified given the need, given what's happening with AI today as well. I want to so we talked about the challenges operating in the region and even within the GCC being heavily regulated, obviously, is also challenging, and then scaling across markets in the MENA region. Given that there's, it's not a cohesive, homogeneous market, it makes it very, very challenging to scale. Let's talk a little bit about happy, or opportunities. So, Saif, I'll come to you, so you can talk a bit about how you prepared for an exit and successfully exited. Ayah, you mentioned the Moroccan company which you supported in scaling from the region to the US. How can health tech companies or founders who are listening to us today prepare to tackle a large market, let's say like the US market? What do they need to prepare for?
Yeah, absolutely. So my peers here highlighted the challenges, of course, and there are many challenges. We don't want to disregard how difficult it is to build a successful company in the region. The Gulf, of course, but even more so the Levant region. But I would say if we were to focus on the opportunities, that lack of infrastructure could potentially be a good thing. So here in the US, we're constantly having conversations about that we've built too many complicated, complex layers in our healthcare system. And so now there are these AI tools that are trying to reduce the tension between those layers. And, not a company out of MENA per se, but Flutterwave is a startup from Nigeria, and they're now a multi-billion-dollar company because they built the fintech and payments platform for the continent of Africa. And in order to do that, there was not much infrastructure in place. And so they had to go and pretty much build the infrastructure themselves. And they were very successful in doing so. And we're actually early investors in Flutterwave. And, something like using WhatsApp in your company, in your startup, that's absolutely unheard of here in the US. But it's something that, is advised that if you're going to build a healthcare startup in the Middle East, or not just the Middle East, but several of these other regions outside of the US or Europe, it's actually advised to use WhatsApp because that'll be more seamless. You'll reach your patients easier. And so that's an opportunity that those have in other countries that you would be impossible to do any type of healthcare communications in the US using WhatsApp. And so my advice, you could say, it's, I do get asked pretty frequently by entrepreneurs from the Middle East region about how do we come to the US and how do we scale our company to the US. And I acknowledge it's like a chicken and egg problem. So they often get asked, or they often ask me, I should say, is do we just move half of our team to the US right off the bat? And, I go back and forth because I would say it would help to have somebody physically here, but you don't want to do that too early. Maybe it might help to secure a small customer, a clinic, a few clinics before actually physically relocating or establishing a satellite office here. And then it's the other question is how do we get US investor money? And so that goes back to the chicken and egg. Of course, it helps to have customers and traction in the US before you start pitching to US-based VCs. The other advice I'd give um, is kind of dodge the hype or that feeling that you have to go straight to Silicon Valley or straight to New York City. Because actually what I'm doing here at Plug and Play, although we're headquartered in Silicon Valley and that's where I'm based, there's actually a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurship in places like Indiana, Arizona, Florida. And so Arizona, for example, the state has a big budget and funding allocated to support entrepreneurs coming from outside of the US to Phoenix, Arizona, to actually establish teams and offices and so they'll provide funding support, they'll provide resources to establish your company there. So that's, one piece of advice. And then there are other programs, like for example, we have a goal program. It's Plug and Play, and it's specifically for cohorts of entrepreneurs that want to explore bringing their company to the US, but we'll essentially, bring them here for a set period of time and support them with different workshops, mentors here in the US, starting introducing them to investors based here in the US. So none of these things are like a, fix all. I would say try multiple different strategies. You will have an inflection point at some point, but that takes a lot of trial and error for you to get there. So just stay persistent and keep persevering. And yeah, those are a few pieces of advice I would share.
Thank you, Ayah. Saif, very quickly, I can't believe we're almost out of time.
Yeah, good
So
job.
you built a business and got acquired. So lessons, what like nuggets of wisdom can you share with the listeners, on how to
This
set
is great. So I'll quickly compare what I've built in the US versus what I've built in Dubai. When I built in Dubai, back to Ayah and the successful model you've invested in, I started building layers, and it worked because we had the consumer base, and then they need a pharmacy and they need a telemedicine, and I didn't like Ayman, so I'll build my own telemedicine. I'll have my own network, but that was an investment nightmare. And our exit, at the least I would call it, was bloody because we had to split the business into smaller pieces that are acquirable. And the lesson learned is because I came from corporate and I thought that startup is disruption. So I needed to disrupt everything, which obviously I learned the difficult way. That was wrong. To echo what you said, Ayah, we were backed by Iowa, and I'm happy if anyone listening wants to go get funding from Iowa State, Iowa City. I think there are so many pockets in the US that you can get funding beyond Silicon Valley and New York. However, we've built the company textbook. This is how you build, this is how you sell. And that's why we had an easier 18 months of building, launching products, raising money, talking to investors. So the one word of wisdom is it's textbook. It's no longer, it's a game. It's like a sport. There are rules and you have to play by the rules. If you want to raise external funding, you'll have to sell the company. And if you are not building a company that is investable and sellable, then just run it as a family business, and there are, I think, especially here, you learn it better that there are SMEs and there are startups. But I think when I go back, especially talking Iraq, maybe the wider Levant, still a baker consider themselves like, we have a startup, and it's not.
Yeah. And do you advise mixing brick and mortar with the tech?
So we sold our brick and mortar business to a tech company that was doing great, but when they bought the regulated business, the clinics, I think it dragged them down. I think it didn't work because the regulation, back to the regulation, talent and infrastructure, there's a big difference if you want to run an easy tech startup versus if you want to run a heavily regulated. And again, back to the story of exit. When it will come to exit, it's not as easy as you think because investors would have preferences, would have a portfolio that they need to work on. However, it's way easier when you combine both for the founder. In your head, you're settled. I own the physician and I own the tech, but it fails eventually.
Yeah, thank you. Lana, maybe you can wrap things up for us. Just looking ahead over the next few years, and I think it's going to be impossible to predict, but what are the trends that we're seeing in the region globally? Just give us that futuristic view.
I'll try to do that. So I think again, on the note of cautious optimism, like we've seen companies like Omada Health and Hinge Health IPO earlier this year. So everyone's kind of tracking them to see how they measure up against the market. So there is kind of revived cautious optimism. We're seeing a lot of platforms targeting oncology, neurology, and obviously with the rise of GLP-1s, Ozempic, Mounjaro, targeting metabolic health, also gaining traction. Investors will always continue to look at the fundamentals of a good team, solving, coming up with platforms and solutions to like real problems. And again, it's shifting the mentality from growth at all costs to profitability, and making sure that you have a team that has kind of burn rate the back of their heads and is very conscious of that. Now, I'd like to see, like selfishly, as Hikma Ventures, we're struggling to find innovative healthcare startups in the MENA. To be honest with you, we receive decks, keep receiving decks to same companies, same categories: telemedicine, pharma delivery, mental health. So they're a dime a dozen. I'd personally like to see more of companies going after things like fertility and again chronic disease management, so metabolic health. And interestingly enough, like to Saif's point, and like you asked about brick and mortar, I'm actually a fan of hybrid models. I think for now, at least in MENA, it'll be brick and mortar that's virtually enabled or virtual first versus virtual only. And interestingly enough, even in the US, like I was reading the other day about GLP-1s, and it turns out that 79% of patients who are on Ozempic or Mounjaro in the US get their prescriptions from primary care or doctors or specialists versus 11% from who get them from online providers. So I think a lot of digital health companies can actually work on providing especially with the disadvantages of using such products and losing muscle mass. You can basically come up with a disruptive structure that works on coaching, nutritional counseling, just to make sure that the whole journey is sustainable. So I think there is a lot of disruption that can happen there, at least in MENA as well. I mean, for me, yeah, I guess the future is hybrid. Would like to see more on kind of metabolic health, fertility, less in kind of this kind of blanket, umbrella, digital health companies that are trying to be kind of all things to all people.
Amazing, interesting. This has been an incredible session, lots of insights. Thank you all for participating and sharing your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Reem.
you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Reem.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Bye.